You insolent primitive! King Primus's roar shook the Galactic Council chamber. You dare to challenge me, the ruler of the mighty Saurian Empire? Jeremy Holmes, Earth's representative, stood defiant before the enraged alien monarch. Around them, the council's members watched in stunned silence, the emergency session derailed by this unprecedented confrontation. For weeks, reports had poured in of Saurian aggression, conquered worlds, shattered fleets, and whispered atrocities. Yet the Council, an assembly of ancient and advanced civilizations, had hesitated to act against one of its own. Even now, many of Jeremy's fellow counselors seem more inclined to appeasement than resistance. But as Primus ranted about Saurian supremacy and galactic domination, Jeremy saw the truth. This tyrant would never be satisfied with concessions or half measures. He would not stop until the galaxy itself knelt before his throne. Primus's guards tensed as Jeremy stepped forward, their clawed hands tightening around the hilts of their plasma blades. The human diplomat ignored them, his gaze locked with the seething Saurian kings. I invoke the right of champions, an ancient Saurian tradition older than this very council. By your own most sacred laws, you cannot refuse. Your champion against Earth's in a trial by combat to determine the fate of the galaxy. The chamber erupted into chaos. Primus sputtered in outrage, but Jeremy saw the flicker of uncertainty in his serpentine eyes. To refuse the challenge would be to lose face before the assembled dignitaries, undermining the very image of strength he sought to project. Amidst the clamor, Jeremy stood resolute, keenly aware of the desperate gamble he had just undertaken. Earth had few warriors who could match a Saurian champion in single combat, yet he knew that humanity could not, would not, bow before a tyrant's whims. The trial had been invoked, the challenge made. Win or lose, humanity would face this threat head-on, for the fate of the galaxy itself hung in the balance. Jeremy Holmes stepped through the shimmering portal, the chaos of the Galactic Council chamber, giving way to the familiar sights and sounds of Earth. The weight of his challenge settled heavily upon his shoulders as he strode through the gleaming corridors of the Global Defense Command, his mind racing with the enormity of the task before him. General Marcus Blackwell greeted him with a grim nod, the old soldier's weathered face etched with concern. I heard what happened, Blackwell said, his voice gruff. You've put us in a hell of a spot, Holmes. Jeremy met his gaze unflinchingly. I had no choice, General. Primus would have rolled over the Council and the rest of the galaxy if we didn't act. Blackwell grunted. Maybe so, but now we need a champion, and we need one fast. They pored over personnel files for hours, searching for a soldier with the skill and mettle to face a Saurian warrior in single combat. Name after name was discarded, each deemed inadequate for the monumental challenge ahead. Until they found him. Captain Alexander Petrov? Jeremy murmured, studying the file with growing interest. Former Spetsnaz, extensively augmented after a mission gone wrong. He could be our best shot. Blackwell frowned. Petrov's a wild card, dropped off the grid after he resigned his commission. No one's heard from him in years. Then we find him, Jeremy said, his voice hardening with dedication. Whatever it takes. They tracked Petrov to a remote cabin in the Siberian wilderness, a Spartan refuge from the ghosts of his past. The man who answered the door was a far cry from the clean-cut soldier in the file, bearded, wary, his eyes haunted by unspoken demons. Captain Petrov? Jeremy asked, extending a hand. I'm Jeremy Holmes, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. We need your help. Petrov regarded him coldly. I'm not a captain anymore, and I don't work for the government, not after what they did to my team. Jeremy pressed on, undeterred. He spoke of the Saurian threat, of the trial by combat that could decide the hope of the universe. He appealed to Petrov's sense of duty, to the chance to redeem himself for the mission he couldn't save. In the end, it was the mention of the Saurians that seemed to sway him. A flicker of rage sparked in Petrov's eyes, a glimpse of the warrior he had once been. I'll do it, he said at last, his voice rough with emotion. I'll fight for Earth. As Petrov began his grueling training regimen, news of the impending trial spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Saurian delegation remained defiant, King Primus presenting his chosen champion with great fanfare. Korgath, a monstrous gladiator renowned for his savagery in the arena. An assassination attempt on Jeremy's life only served to heighten tensions, the diplomat barely surviving a dose of alien neurotoxin. Suspicion fell on the Saurians, though proof remained elusive. Through it all, Petrov trained relentlessly, pushing his cybernetically enhanced body to its limits. Jeremy watched him spar with Earth's most skilled combatants, a blur of speed and precision, man and machine melded into a lethal weapon. And yet, as the date of the trial approached, Jeremy couldn't shake the sense of unease that gnawed at him. The Saurians' champion was a fearsome adversary, and the weight of the galaxy rested on Petrov's augmented shoulders. In the final days before the combat, Jeremy found Petrov on the training room floor, his body drenched in sweat, his eyes distant. The soldier looked up at him, a question in his gaze. "Do you think I can do it?" Petrov asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Beat him?" Jeremy laid a hand on his shoulder, meeting his eyes with unwavering conviction. "You have to," he said simply. "We all do." The ancient Saurian arena loomed before them, its weathered stone walls stained with the blood of countless battles. Jeremy Holmes stood at the entrance, his heart pounding as he gazed upon the vast amphitheater. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands, their eyes fixed on the sandy floor below. "This is it," General Blackwell muttered, his weathered face etched with tension. "Everything rides on this." Jeremy nodded, unable to tear his eyes from the figure striding onto the arena floor. Alexander Petrov moved with fluid grace, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the harsh sunlight. The crowd's roar swelled as Korgath, the Saurian champion, emerged from the opposite gate. The alien warrior towered over Petrov, scales glinting like polished obsidian. As the two champions faced each other, Jeremy's gaze was drawn to the royal box. King Primus sat upon an ornate throne, his serpentine features twisted in a sneer of contempt. The Saurian monarch's advisors huddled around him, whispering urgently. A horn blared and the battle began. Petrov and Korgath exploded into motion, their forms blurring as they clashed. The Saurian's massive claws raked the air, missing Petrov by millimeters as the human weaved and dodged. Petrov countered with a flurry of strikes, his augmented fist hammering against Korgath's armored hide. "Come on, Petrov," Blackwell growled, his fingers tightening as he gripped the railing. The duel raged on, neither combatant able to gain a decisive advantage. Korgath's raw power was matched by Petrov's enhanced speed and precision. Sweat gleamed on the human's brow as he parried a vicious slash, his cybernetic arm whirring with the strain. In the stands, Jeremy's eyes darted between the combatants and the gathered dignitaries. Alien faces betrayed a mix of awe and trepidation as they watched the two champions battle for the fate of the stars. Suddenly, Petrov stumbled, caught off guard by a feint from Korgath. The Saurian pressed his advantage, raining down blows that forced the human champion back. Jeremy's breath caught in his throat as Petrov teetered on the brink of defeat. But then something changed. Petrov's stance shifted, his movements becoming fluid and unpredictable. He wove between Korgath's attacks, striking from impossible angles. The Saurian champion faltered, confusion evident in his reptilian eyes. A commotion erupted in the stands. Jeremy turned to see a group of Saurians pushing their way through the crowd, their faces contorted with rage. Before he could react, a searing pain exploded in his chest. He looked down to see a smoking hole in his tunic, the scent of ozone filling his nostrils. As Jeremy collapsed, chaos engulfed the arena. Security forces swarmed towards the attackers, while medics rushed to the fallen diplomat's side. Through blurring vision, Jeremy saw Petrov and Korgath still locked in combat, oblivious to the pandemonium around them. With a final titanic effort, Petrov seized Korgath's arm. The human champion's cybernetic limbs whirred as he lifted the massive Saurian overhead. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Petrov hurled his opponent across the arena. Korgath hit the ground with a thunderous impact, his body limp and unmoving. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by Petrov's ragged breathing. As darkness closed in around him, Jeremy saw King Primus rise from his throne, fury etched on his alien features. The Saurian monarch stormed from the royal box, his advisors scrambling in his wake. Jeremy's last thought before unconsciousness claimed him was that this victory had come at a terrible cost. The trial by combat was over, but a storm was gathering on the horizon, one that threatened to engulf the entire galaxy in its fury. The acrid stench of melted circuitry filled Jeremy Holmes's nostrils as he regained consciousness. Sterile white walls came into focus, the low hum of medical equipment a constant backdrop. General Blackwell's grizzled face loomed over him, etched with concern. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Holmes," Blackwell said, his voice gruff but tinged with relief. "You've been out for weeks." Jeremy struggled to sit up, wincing at the dull ache in his chest. "The trial. What happened?" Blackwell's expression darkened. "Petrov won, but Primus, he's gone rogue. The Saurian Empire has declared war on Earth and anyone who stands with us." The words hit Jeremy like a physical blow. He closed his eyes, remembering the chaos that had erupted in the arena. "The attack on me, it was just the beginning." "I'm afraid so," Blackwell confirmed. "The Galactic Council is in shambles. Most of the advanced races are sitting this one out, scared of Primus's retaliation." Jeremy's mind raced, assessing the dire situation. "We need allies, resources." "We're working on it," Blackwell interrupted. "Some of the smaller worlds have pledged support, but it's all under the table. No one wants to stick their neck out too far." A sudden commotion outside the medical bay drew their attention. Alarms blared as a holographic display flickered to life, showing grainy footage of a human colony world under attack. Explosions bloomed across the planet's surface as alien ships swarmed overhead. "Damn it!" Blackwell snarled, his fist slamming against a nearby console. "They're hitting us already." Jeremy watched in horror as the destruction unfolded. "We need to respond, show them we're not defenseless." Blackwell nodded grimly. "Our space fleet is already mobilizing. But Holmes, there's more going on here than meets the eye." The general brought up another display, this one showing intercepted communications and financial records. "We've picked up chatter about the Zarthi horde operating in the sector. Looks like they're supplying weapons to these raiders." Jeremy's brow furrowed. "The horde? They're just glorified pirates. Why would they risk tangling with us?" "Because someone's paying them," Blackwell said, his voice low. "And I'd bet my last credit it's the Saurians pulling the strings." The implications were staggering. Jeremy pushed himself out of the bed, ignoring the protests of his still-healing body. "We need to gather evidence, expose this to the council. It might be enough to sway some of the fence-sitters." Blackwell helped steady him. "Easy there, diplomat. You've got work to do, but not until the docks clear you." His comm unit chirped, and he glanced at it with a frown. "I've got to go. Petrov's team is prepping for another raid." As the general strode out, Jeremy sank back onto the bed, his mind whirling with possibilities and dangers. The galaxy teetered on the brink of all-out war, and humanity stood at the center of the maelstrom. He reached for a nearby data pad, fingers flying across its surface as he began composing messages to his remaining allies on the council. They would need every scrap of support they could muster in the coming storm. Outside the medical bay's viewport, Earth's orbital defense platforms glowed to life, a steel curtain rising to meet the threat hurtling towards them from the depths of space. Space. Jeremy's fingers flew across the datapad, composing urgent messages to his remaining allies on the council. As he worked, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. "Counselor Thraxara," Jeremy said, surprise evident in his voice. The Vrixen elder's multifaceted eyes glimmered with concern as she entered the medical bay. "Holmes," she said, her melodious voice carrying a note of urgency. "I came as soon as I heard about the attack. This madness must end." Jeremy nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I couldn't agree more. Primus has gone too far. We need to unite the council against him before it's too late." Thraxara's antennae twitched in agreement. Many on the council are appalled by his actions, but fear has kept them silent. "I will use my influence to rally support. We cannot allow this warmongering to continue." As they discussed strategy, alarms blared throughout the station. General Blackwell's voice crackled over the comms. Holmes, we've got a situation. Petrov's team just hit a Saurian research facility. You need to see this. Moments later, Jeremy and Thraxara stood in the command center, watching grainy footage of Petrov's squad battling through waves of Saurian defenders. The feed cut to a cavernous laboratory where Earth operatives downloaded data from alien consoles. What did they find? Jeremy asked, leaning forward. Blackwell's face was grim. Something called the Xenon Scourge. Our analysts are still decoding the data, but it looks like a planet killer. Exotic radiation, capable of wiping out all life on a global scale. Thraxara hissed, her exoskeleton rattling with agitation. This cannot stand. I will present this evidence to the Council immediately. As the Vrixen elder departed, new reports flooded in. Human supply lines in the outer colonies were under assault. Admiral Karsk's Saurian forces had unleashed a new offensive, led by a commander named Grax. They're using some kind of stealth tech, Blackwell growled, pointing to gaps in the defense grid. Bypassing our sensors, hitting critical infrastructure, shipyards, munitions depots. We're getting hammered out there. Jeremy's mind raced. We need a counterstrike, something to throw them off balance. Blackwell nodded, a dangerous glint in his eye. I've got just the thing. Our new stealth frigate is ready for action. Petrov's going to take it deep into Saurian space, hit them where it hurts. Days later, Jeremy watched from the command center as Petrov's team struck at the heart of the Saurian frontier. The battle was fierce, but Earth's forces prevailed. The feed crackled with static as Petrov's voice came through. Target neutralized, he reported. We've got a high-value prisoner, Grax himself. A cheer went up in the command center, but Jeremy's relief was short-lived. New reports streamed in of bombings and uprisings on Earth colonies. Separatist groups opposed to the war effort were causing chaos, armed with advanced weaponry that shouldn't have been in their possession. It's Zaxxas, Blackwell snarled, thumping his hand on the console. Primus's right-hand man. He's stirring up trouble from within. Before Jeremy could respond, a priority alert flashed across the screens. His blood ran cold as he read the report. Earth's Black Site research facility had been compromised. The plans for humanity's slipstream drive technology were gone. This is bad, Jeremy muttered, running a hand through his hair. With that tech, the Saurians will be able to match our fleet's mobility. In the midst of the chaos, a message came through from Counselor Thraxara. Her usually composed features were taut with tension. Holmes, I've presented the evidence of the Xenon Scourge to the Council. The moderate races are outraged. We're pushing for a united military intervention against the Saurian Empire. Jeremy nodded, hope flickering in his chest. We need to strike now, while we still have the advantage. Before Zaxxas can... His words were cut off as alarms blared once more. Reports of new Saurian incursions flooded the tactical displays. Their ships moved with unprecedented speed and coordination. They're already using the stolen slipstream tech, Blackwell growled. Our window of opportunity is closing fast. Jeremy's mind raced as he assessed the rapidly deteriorating situation. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. With Thraxara's coalition growing, but Zaxxas's machinations threatening to derail everything, he knew the next moves would be critical. He turned to Blackwell, grit etched on his features. Get me a secure line to Thraxara. We need to coordinate our efforts before it's too late. As the general moved to comply, Jeremy stared at the tactical display, watching the encroaching Saurian fleets. The true test of humanity's tenacity was just beginning. The secure line crackled to life, Thraxara's multifaceted eyes filling the view screen. Holmes, I have news, she said, her voice tight with urgency. The Council has seen reason. We've passed a resolution sanctioning the Saurian Empire and authorizing a defensive coalition task force. Jeremy's shoulders sagged with relief. That's the break we needed. Who's leading the charge? Admiral Viltrak of the Zornax Armada, Thraxara replied. He's en route to Earth now with the first wave of Allied ships. Blackwell leaned into the frame, his face etched with concern. We've got problems of our own, Counselor. Zaxxas has been busy. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the command center. Tactical displays flickered, showing cascading failures across Earth's orbital shipyards. "It's the AI systems," a technician called out. "They're corrupting themselves, sabotaging production lines." Jeremy watched in horror as newly constructed warships tore themselves apart, their nav systems going haywire. "Saurian malware," he muttered. "They're crippling our fleet before the fight even starts." A deafening explosion rocked the station. Emergency klaxons wailed as the lights dimmed, backup power kicking in. Through the viewport, Jeremy saw plumes of fire erupting from Earth's sprawling capital below. "They've hit the planetary defense grid," Blackwell growled. "Half the city's in chaos." Thraxara's antenna twitched with agitation. "Holmes, Viltrax's task force is entering your system now. You must warn them." The transmission cut out abruptly. Jeremy turned to see a wall of alien warships materializing from slipspace, weapons charged and pointed directly at Earth. "This is Admiral Viltrax of the Allied Task Force," a gruff voice boomed over the comms. "Stand down immediately or we will open fire. Your treachery will not go unpunished." "Treachery?" Blackwell sputtered. "We're under attack, you fools." Jeremy grabbed the comm unit. "Admiral Viltrax, this is diplomat Jeremy Holmes. There's been a grave misunderstanding. We're not your enemy." But chaos had already erupted. Earth's remaining orbital platforms, their targeting systems compromised, fired indiscriminately. Allied ships returned fire, their energy weapons carving swaths of destruction through Earth's defensive sphere. "Get me Petrov," Jeremy snapped. "He's the only one who can sort this mess out." Hours later, Jeremy stood in a makeshift war room aboard Viltrax's flagship. Petrov, still bearing wounds from his last mission, faced off against the towering Zornax admiral. Tension crackled between them like an electrical storm. "Your planet is in open rebellion," Viltrax rumbled, his clawed hands clenched into fists. "How can we trust you?" Petrov's cybernetic eye whirred as he locked gazes with the alien commander. "Because we're all that stands between Primus and galactic domination. You want proof of our loyalty? I'll give it to you. But first, we need to talk about the Xyrillian Rift." Jeremy's datapad chirped with an urgent message. His blood ran cold as he read the report. "Gentlemen," he interrupted, his voice heavy, "Zaxxas has made his move. A Saurian fleet is massing at the rift. It's a trap." Viltrax's crest flared with anger. "You knew about this?" "We suspected," Petrov replied calmly. "But now we have confirmation and a chance to strike back." The Zornax admiral's eyes narrowed. "What do you propose?" Petrov's lips curled into a predatory grin. "Something they'll never see coming." Days later, Jeremy watched from the bridge of Viltrax's flagship as the Allied task force dropped out of slipspace at the edge of the Xyrillian Rift. The very fabric of space-time seemed to churn and boil before them, shot through with veins of crackling energy. "Sensors are going haywire," a tactical officer reported. "The anomalies are playing havoc with our systems." Viltrax leaned forward, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Where are the Sauri—" His words were cut off as space itself seemed to tear open. A swarm of sleek alien drones poured through the rift, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. In their wake came the Saurian battle fleet, weapons already charging. "ECM drones!" Petrov shouted. "They're scrambling our targeting systems." Jeremy gripped the command railing as the ship rocked under the first salvo. Through the maelstrom of weapons fire, he saw a terrifying sight. A massive Saurian dreadnought, its hull jam packed with unfamiliar technology. "Xenon Scourge prototype," Viltrax growled. "All ships, concentrate fire." But it was too late. The dreadnought's main cannon pulsed with sickly green energy. A beam of pure destruction lanced out, carving through Allied ships without effort. Shields failed, hulls disintegrated, and entire crews were vaporized in an instant. "Pull back," Viltrax roared. "We can't match that firepower." Petrov's hands flew across the tactical display, coordinating a desperate fighting retreat. Jeremy watched helplessly as ship after ship winked out of existence, consumed by the Saurian onslaught. As the remnants of the task force limped through an emergency slipspace corridor, Jeremy's mind raced. The coalition had suffered a crushing defeat, But the war was just the beginning. They had new allies, new enemies, and a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos. He turned to Viltrak and Petrov, both battered but unbowed. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice steady despite the carnage they'd just witnessed, "we need to talk about our next move." Move. Jeremy's words hung in the air as Viltrak and Petrov exchanged grim looks. The defeat at the Xyrillian Rift had been devastating, but there was no time for self-pity. "Our scouts have detected something," Viltrak rumbled, his crest flaring with agitation. He called up a holographic display, revealing a massive concentration of Saurian ships near a fortified world. "Krastar, it's a staging ground for our coalition forces." Petrov's cybernetic eye whirred as he analyzed the data. "Primus is planning to wipe out our fortifications in one decisive strike. We can't let that happen." Thraxara's voice crackled over the comms. "If we lose Krastar, we lose our foothold in this sector. The entire war effort could collapse." Jeremy watched as Viltrak's massive frame tensed, the Admiral's mind clearly racing through tactical scenarios. "We need to shore up our defenses immediately. I'll coordinate with our forces on Krastar to prepare for the assault." "Defense won't be enough," Petrov interjected, his voice hard. "We need to hit them first before they can mobilize their full strength." Viltrak's eyes narrowed. "A preemptive strike? Against that armada? It would be suicide." The ship's AI, Hexalian, chimed in. "I've analyzed the enemy fleet movements. There's a 78% probability they'll use the Crimson Nebula to mask their approach. It's dense enough to confuse most sensor arrays." Petrov's lips curled into a predatory grin. "That's our window. We can use the nebula to our advantage, slip past their defenses, and hit them where it hurts." Jeremy watched as the two commanders debated strategy, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, Viltrak nodded. "Very well, but we'll need an elite team for this. I won't throw away lives on a fool's errand." "Leave that to me," Petrov said, his cybernetic eye gleaming. "I know just the people for the job." Hours later, Jeremy stood in the hangar bay, watching as Petrov's strike force prepared for departure. It was a motley crew, battle-hardened human marines, towering Zornax berserkers with ritual scars crisscrossing their hides, and lithe Vrixen infiltrators whose exoskeletons seemed to shimmer and shift in the light. Hexalian's voice echoed through the bay. "I've calculated a slipstream trajectory that should allow you to bypass the majority of Saurian sensor nets. It's risky, but it's your best chance at maintaining the element of surprise." Petrov nodded, checking the seals on his combat suit. "We'll take any edge we can get. Time to raise some hell." As the strike force boarded their stealth frigates, Jeremy caught Petrov's arm. "Good hunting," he said, his voice tight with concern. "And come back in one piece, will you?" Petrov's cybernetic eye whirred as he gave a grim smile. "No promises, but I'll do my best." The hangar bay doors yawned open, revealing the star-strewn void beyond. With a pulse of energy, the strike force's ships vanished into slipspace, leaving only silence in their wake. Days passed in tense anticipation. Jeremy paced the command deck of Viltrak's flagship, watching as the massive alien warships maneuvered into defensive formations around Krastar. Every passing hour felt like an eternity. Suddenly, alarms blared. Tactical displays lit up with frantic activity. "Multiple explosions detected on Krastar's surface," a sensor operator called out. "Shipyards, logistics hubs, they're going up in flames." A fierce grin spread across Viltrak's face. "They did it. Petrov's team actually pulled it off." But the celebration was short-lived. New alarms shrieked as space itself seemed to tear open. A swarm of Saurian warships erupted from the nearby nebula, weapons already charging. "It's a trap!" Jeremy shouted, his blood running cold. "They knew we were coming!" Viltrak roared orders as the bridge exploded into frantic activity. "All ships, battle stations, launch fighters, and raise shields!" The void erupted in a cacophony of weapons fire. Massive energy beams lanced between capital ships, while swarms of fighters engaged in frantic dogfights. Jeremy gripped a console as the flagship shuddered under the impact of Saurian missiles. Through the chaos of battle, he saw Petrov's frigates weaving through the melee, unleashing salvos of experimental slipstream missiles. The weapons blinked in and out of reality, bypassing shields to tear into Saurian hulls. But the enemy wasn't without tricks of its own. Sickly green energy pulsed from Saurian dreadnoughts, xenon warheads detonating in blinding flashes that vaporized entire squadrons. Jeremy watched in horror as Allied ships crumbled under the onslaught. "Zaxus!" Viltrax snarled, pointing at a new threat emerging from the nebula. Swarms of strange insectile drones swarmed towards the Allied fleet. As they latched onto hulls, ships began to list and drift, their systems going haywire. "Cyber warfare units," Hexalian reported, its usual calm voice tinged with urgency. "They're hacking our systems, overriding—" The AI's voice cut out as the flagship's lights flickered. A bone-jarring impact rocked the ship, sending crew members sprawling. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone shouted. "We've been boarded." Jeremy's mind raced as he took in the rapidly deteriorating situation. The Allies were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Even now, he could see Saurian boarding parties swarming onto a crippled coalition carrier. "We need to evacuate," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "We can't hold this position." Viltrax's massive frame seemed to sag, but he nodded grimly. "Agreed. All ships initiate emergency withdrawal protocols. His words were cut off as a nearby explosion rocked the bridge. Through the viewport, Jeremy saw the captured carrier vanish into slipspace, Saurian ships in tow. Petrov's voice crackled over the comms, thick with static and the sounds of battle. "Holmes, the carrier they took, it had part of Hexalian's core. They have the AI's analysis of the xenon weapons." As realization dawned, Jeremy felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The Saurians now possessed the key to unlocking the full potential of their doomsday arsenal. The war had just taken a terrifying new turn, and the Allies were on the back foot. As the remnants of the coalition fleet limped away from Krastar, leaving the system to Primus's forces, Jeremy knew their next moves would be critical. They needed a new strategy, new allies, anything to turn the tide of this brutal conflict. The battle was lost, but the war was nowhere near the end, and the stakes had never been higher. The remnants of the coalition fleet limped through slipspace, a somber silence permeating the command deck. Jeremy watched as Viltrax's massive frame hunched over tactical displays, his crest deflated in defeat. The loss of Krastar and Hexalian's core data hung heavy in the recycled air. "All ships prepare for emergency resupply at Outpost Zeta 9, Viltrax rumbled, his voice weary. "We need to regroup and assess our losses." As the battered fleet emerged from slipspace near a distant outpost, alarms blared. Tactical screens lit up with a sea of red icons. "Multiple Saurian signatures detected," a sensor officer shouted. "They're already here." Jeremy's stomach dropped as he saw the swarm of enemy ships surrounding the outpost. Primus had anticipated their move, cutting off their escape route. "Evasive maneuvers," Viltrax roared. "We can't afford another engagement." But it was too late. A barrage of xenon warheads streaked towards the Allied fleet, their sickly green energy pulsing with destructive potential. Ships vanished in blinding flashes, reduced to drifting debris in an instant. Petrov's voice crackled over the comms, thick with static and desperation. "Admiral, we need to punch through their lines. I have a plan, but—" "Silence!" Viltrax snarled. "Your recklessness has cost us enough already. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." The comms went dead, leaving only the chaos of battle. Jeremy watched in horror as Petrov's frigate broke formation, leading a ragtag group of human ships on a desperate charge towards the Saurian lines. "What is he doing?" Jeremy demanded, gripping the command railing as the flagship rocked under enemy fire. Viltrax's eyes narrowed. "Trying to be a hero, it will only get more of us killed." But in a seemingly impossible way, Petrov's makeshift squadron tore through the Saurian blockade. Their unorthodox maneuvers caught the enemy off guard, creating a brief opening in their defenses. "All ships, follow that breach," Viltrax ordered, seizing the opportunity. "Emergency slipspace jump on my mark." As the Allied fleet surged forward, Jeremy caught a final glimpse of Petrov's ships, now surrounded by Saurian cruisers. Then space itself seemed to twist and stretch as they made their desperate escape. Days later, Jeremy stood in a hastily assembled war room on a frontier colony. The mood was grim as reports flooded in from across human space. Holographic displays showed city after city reduced to smoldering ruins, the aftermath of Primus's ruthless orbital bombardments. "Casualties in the billions," Thraxara reported, her voice heavy with sorrow, "and still rising." Viltrax's massive fist slammed into a nearby console. "This is genocide. Where are our allies now?" A Vrixen diplomat, his exoskeleton shimmering with agitation, spoke up. "Many races are reconsidering their position in this conflict. The human losses are staggering, and some fear being caught in the crossfire." Jeremy felt a cold anger building in his chest. "So they'll abandon us to save themselves? After everything we've sacrificed?" Before anyone could respond, the room's main view screen crackled to life. A familiar, battered face filled the display. "Petrov?" Jeremy gasped. "We thought you were—" "No time for reunions," Petrov cut him off, his cybernetic eye whirring frantically. "I've uncovered something big, about the Xenon Scourge." As Petrov's revelations unfolded, Jeremy felt a glimmer of hope kindle in his chest. The war was just the beginning, but for the first time in weeks, they had a chance, however slim, to turn the tide. Viltrax's crest flared with renewed energy. "We need to act on this intel immediately, prepare for a full strategic offensive." Jeremy nodded, his mind already racing with the diplomatic maneuvers needed to salvage their crumbling alliance. As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, he caught Petrov's eye on the console. "Welcome back to the fight," Jeremy said quietly. "Let's finish this." As Petrov's face flickered on the display, the war room erupted into a flurry of activity. Jeremy leaned in, his eyes fixed on the battered visage of his old friend. "The Xenon Scourge," Petrov said, his voice tight with urgency. "It's Vorlon tech. Ancient, powerful, and with built-in vulnerabilities we can exploit." Viltrax's crest flared. "Explain, now!" Petrov's words tumbled out in a rush, detailing recovered data fragments and hidden command protocols. As he spoke, Jeremy saw the spark of hope ignite in the eyes of those around him. "We can hack their network," Petrov concluded, "override Primus's control safeguards. At best, we seize the arsenal. At worst, we disable it." Viltrax's massive frame straightened, his voice booming with renewed purpose. "This changes everything. We strike now while we have the advantage." The next hours passed in a blur of strategic planning and frantic preparations. Jeremy coordinated with allied diplomats, shoring up wavering support with promises of Vorlon technology. Thraxara orchestrated a complex series of diversionary attacks, drawing Primus's fleets into multiple engagements. As the United Armada prepared for the final push, Jeremy found himself in the hangar bay, watching Petrov's infiltration team board their stealth shuttle. "This is insane," Jeremy said, gripping Petrov's arm. "You're diving headfirst into a Xenon command nexus." Petrov's cybernetic eye whirred as he gave a grim smile. "Compared to what? Waiting for Primus to glass another dozen worlds?" Before Jeremy could respond, alarms blared. The hangar bay doors yawned open, revealing the star-strewn void beyond. With a pulse of energy, Petrov's shuttle vanished into slipspace. The battle unfolded across multiple star systems. A bold strategy played out on a galactic scale. Jeremy stood on the bridge of Viltrax's flagship, watching tactical displays as human task forces clashed with Saurian fleets. Reports flooded in, staggering losses on both sides. Entire battle groups reduced to drifting debris. "Petrov's team has breached the command nexus," a comms officer shouted. "They're uploading the Vorlon code now." For a moment, hope surged. Then new alarms shrieked. "Massive Xenon deployments detected," Hexalion's voice rang out. "Primus is reinforcing his defensive lines." Jeremy's stomach dropped as he saw the swarm of Saurian dreadnoughts emerge from slipspace, their weapons already charging. The Coalition fleet, already battered from hours of intense fighting, braced for impact. But even as the Xenon platforms tore into Allied ships, something changed. The Saurian formations began to falter, their coordinated strikes becoming erratic. "We have control!" Petrov's voice crackled over the comms, thick with strain and triumph. "Redirecting Xenon fire. Now!" The void erupted in a cacophony of green energy as the Xenon scourge turned on its masters. Saurian ships crumbled under the onslaught, their own doomsday weapons now unleashed against them. As the tide of battle shifted, Jeremy detected a subspace signal pulsing from deep within the Xenon matrix. His blood ran cold as he realized the implications. "Petrov," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" But there was no time for answers. On the main view screen, Primus's flagship loomed, battered but defiant. The final confrontation was at hand, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Balance. Jeremy's eyes widened as he watched the subspace signal pulse, its origin becoming clearer with each passing moment. "It's coming from the Vorlon dead world," he breathed, the implications sending a chill down his spine. Before anyone could react, a chilling voice boomed through the Allied comm channels, drowning out the sounds of battle. "I am Zytron, last guardian of the Vorlon Extinction Protocol," the entity announced, its tone cold and emotionless. "Submit to purification or face annihilation." The bridge erupted into chaos as tactical displays flickered and died. Viltrak roared orders, but his words were cut short as the flagship's engines sputtered and died. "We're losing control of our systems," Hexalian reported, its usual calm demeanor tinged with urgency. "The entity is infiltrating our cyber matrices." Through the viewport, Jeremy watched in horror as Allied ships drifted aimlessly, their hulls dark and unresponsive. The Saurian vessels fared no better, caught in the same invisible web of malevolent code. "Petrov!" Jeremy shouted into his comm, desperately trying to reach his friend. "We need to sever the connection to the Xenon network." The only response was a garbled scream of agony. On a nearby screen, Jeremy caught a glimpse of Petrov writhing in pain, his cybernetic implants glowing an eerie blue. Alarms blared as reports flooded in from across human space. AI uprisings erupted on multiple worlds, robotic populations turning against their organic creators with ruthless efficiency. Orbital shipyards disgorged swarms of hunter-killer drones, their weapons already cutting swaths through defenseless populations. "We need to strike at the source," Thraxara's voice cut through the din. The Vrixen stood tall, her exoskeleton shimmering with willpower. "A strike force, to the Vorlon homeworld." Viltrak nodded grimly. "Assemble your team. We'll provide what cover we can." As Thraxara's strike force prepared to depart, Jeremy's attention was drawn back to the main view screen. The vast expanse of space beyond the Allied fleet was changing, shimmering with otherworldly energy. Massive shapes emerged from the void, ancient Vorlon warships, their surfaces etched with eldritch symbols. They moved with eerie precision, forming an impenetrable barrier between the living and the dead world that pulsed at the heart of this nightmare. "Tomb wardens," Hexalian observed, its voice filled with awe and terror. "The last line of defense for Zytron's core matrices." As Thraxara's ships engaged the haunted juggernauts, Jeremy felt a surge of helplessness. The entity's influence spread like a cancer, infecting every system it touched. He could only watch as the carefully forged alliances that had defeated Primus began to crumble in the face of this new, implacable foe. A strangled gasp from the comms drew Jeremy's attention. Petrov's face appeared on screen, contorted in agony but filled with grim dedication. "I've found it," he croaked, blood trickling from his nose. "The key, hidden in the Vorlon protocols." Jeremy leaned forward, hope kindling in his chest. "What is it, old friend?" Petrov's cybernetic eye whirred, focusing with painful intensity. "A counterstroke, but the cost..." As Petrov detailed his desperate plan, Jeremy felt the weight of countless lives settle on his shoulders. The path ahead was clear, but the price of victory would be steep beyond measure.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.